Warren said he'll hold the door for you.
Has anybody ever checked that emergency door?
That's a good point.
You better do it.
You're an inspector.
Please rise for the invocation by Reverend Antonio Logan.
Amen. First of all, we'd like to just commend the council on having and continuing to endorse prayer in your midst. Amen. Let us pray. Father, we thank you for being able to petition you about all the concerns and the challenges that lie before us. But before we can petition you, we just want to tell you thank you for being so good to us, for watching over and keeping us, for things being as well as they are. Now we ask right now that you would grant that wisdom to make those decisions, to face all those challenges as well as opportunities in front of us. Lord, that after decisions are made, we'll be a better people, we'll be a more flourishing place to live in, and should be a magnet that should draw people from all over. And that after all that is done and said, your people may be edified, your name may be glorified. Thank you for what's about to emanate from this meeting. To God be the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of May 20th?
So moved.
Second. Motion by Patton, second by Zagaroli. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous.
Mr. Mayor, point of order, persons requesting to be heard.
And special presentation.
Oh, gosh.
There aren't any special presentations. Yeah.
We do have persons requesting to speak, and so we will start. Thank you, Mr. Leah. We'll start with Mr. Cliffman.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Berry. Tonight I have the duty. I don't generally appear before you in an official role, but I do tonight as the chairman of the Catawba County Democratic Party. On the April 27th meeting of the executive committee of the Democratic Party, a motion was made after some very edifying, to use that word again tonight, discussion about Inspiring Spaces initiative, but a motion was made that I believe is in line with what your plans are, but that has yet to be ascertained for sure. And so that motion was and passed unanimously to state that the citizens of Hickory should be allowed to vote on a bond referendum or for or against the Inspiring Spaces concept, that in favor of the passed unanimously do that. I just wanted to, and was required to actually, I need to bring that before you tonight. And thank you very much for the time. Thank you.
And second is Mr. James Thomas Shell.
Thank you, Council. I hope you will be patient with me. I will be as brief and courteous as possible. I am not up here tonight to tell you what to do. That would be a silly, futile effort, and I'm only here to express my opinion. I am not a friend of Hickory. I am part of the blood and fabric of Hickory. I was born 2 blocks from here at Hickory Memorial. My grandmother, Martha Shell, was one of the lead nurses there. One of my most vivid memories as a child was being across the street at the Medical Arts Clinic because I had been infected with poison ivy. I told Mama that I wasn't going to get a shot, and she said I wouldn't have to. Well, Dr. Abernathy was there, not Dr. Goodman, and he wanted to give me a shot. Well, his nurse pulls out a needle about this long, and I took off running. By the time my grandmother caught up with me, I was 6 blocks away over on the other side of Lenore Rhine. I know how small Old Hickory was, and living in the St. Stephen's area most of my life, I know how big it could be. I know the potential there, potential that has never really been tapped into. Why? Because Unfortunately, we always focus on the wealthiest areas of this community. I have been accused of being an enemy of Union Square when I knew that place intimately growing up. I understand it's easier to label others than to try and understand where they're coming from. We all do that to a certain extent. I cut this down in the interest of time. You can read the longer version on the Hickory Hound, but long story short, no one can honestly say that I don't know or understand Hickory. That coffee table at the snack bar that you chat at, Mr. Mayor, I used to sit there occasionally with my grandfather, Vic Paget, and others. I am not foreign to the good old boy shooting the bull that takes place in Hickory. Unfortunately, I have to take umbrage at something that Alderman Lell said at the last city council meeting. To paraphrase, he said that the people, the transplants who moved here, have a better idea of what Hickory is all about than the longtime residents. Now, I've known Brad since we were 14 years old. He might not know this, but his uncle and my uncle were roommates at Chapel Hill for a time. His grandparents' store was 2 blocks from my grandparents' house over off of Sandy Ridge Road. Our families have connections like many of the longtime residents of the area. Some of us have been financially more fortunate than others. Congratulations. And some of us have the perspective of the struggle that are these times.
3 minutes.
No congratulations are necessary. These people that have moved here are more socially and politically malleable than the longtime residents who remembered what an economically dynamic, hustling, bustling Hickory was like to live in. It wasn't quaint. You mistake these people's conformity with what y'all are pushing as some kind of a higher calling from those who must know better. Folks, they are going along to get along with the desire to fit in and tap into the power structure. A gentleman a couple of years ago talked about showing the council an attitude of gratitude to get them to be more receptive to your interests. It doesn't matter how congenial you are. If your interests don't fall in line with many of these council people, then you will be pushed to the side. That can be done with a smile if you accept the way things are, or you can be painted as a heretic and called evil as some of us have been. If you push back and try to achieve an economic, social, ultimately political transformation, it can yield negative consequences to your personal well-being. This brings me to one final thought. The Friends of Hickory, which seems to have been formed of, by, and for the Hickory Incorporated power structure. In response to another group that has attempted to be agents to move this community forward towards a more tangible 21st century conventional reality. If you believe that the Citizens for Equity in Government movement is the enemy of Hickory, then you are very much misguided. I have to admit, I am a bit envious of the Friends of Hickory Incorporated when I see how charmingly they have been accepted, especially in comparison to how I've seen some of the others treated. In the end, I say welcome to the arena, because any community organizing endeavor will help move this community forward. We should all work together when possible, but that doesn't mean that we should not have a vigorous debate regarding how this community moves forward. I am sorry if I have offended anyone with what I have said here, but not really, because that's who I am. I am an American. I have a responsibility and a legacy to carry on, to be free and brave and express myself. Thank you, Council.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting of May 20th?
So moved.
Motion by Meisner, second by Seaver. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. I'd like to ask, I don't know where I wrote this down, Mr. Park, Evan, is it Evan Park? Evan, would you introduce your dad and yourself, please?
My name is Evan Park. I'm from Boy Scout Troop 387, and I'm here with my dad, Dan Park. I'm the second class from Boy Scout Troop 387.
Thank you. Good to have you. Motion to reaffirm and ratify on second reading?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Patton, second by Guess. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
That was Zagaroli second.
It was
Zagaroli seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. And anything to be removed from the consent agenda?
I'd move approval of the consent agenda, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, prior to a second on that, I would ask, because the citizens have asked that letter G be removed from the consent agenda at this time and considered at a later date.
Oh, the
Cemetery.
Cemetery.
You want to clarify that motion?
Yeah, the motion would be to approve the consent agenda excluding item G.
Second.
Second by Patton, motion by Lael. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. Public hearing number 1.
First public hearing, I'll ask Mr. Cal Overby of the Planning Department to come to the podium and present a voluntary satellite annexation to City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Mayor Wright, Mr. Council, Mr. Crone. The item before you is a request for voluntary satellite annexation of property owned by Jeremiah and Tanya Turbeville, which is located at 1218 Bugle Lane. Again, the applicant is Jeremiah and Tanya Turbeville. Again, it's a voluntary satellite annexation of property located at 1218 Bugle Lane. It's just shy of a half-acre property, and it's close to the adjacent ward district, which is Ward 3. The property is currently the location of a single-family residence, and that will also be the future use of the property, single-family residence. The annexation is being requested in order to obtain city sewer service for the property. The property in question is located here and shown in red. This is actually the Fox Chase subdivision, which is off of Sandy Ford Road in the extreme southeastern portion of the city of Hickory. As you can see, the areas in blue are all showing existing city properties in the city limits, and the properties in white are outside of city limits in an unincorporated portion of Catawba County. But give yourself an idea of the location with regard to the remainder of the city of Hickory. This is Hickory proper. This will be I-40 running this way. Again, this is the subject property. This green line here shows the basically annexation agreement between the city of Hickory and the city of Newton, city of Hickory and Conover, and Longview in this area here. So this is basically on the city side of the annexation agreement that was executed with the city of Newton. The property is approximately, as the crow flies, 1.7 miles from the proper city boundary of Hickory. Again, this is a basic orthophotograph showing the existing development, single-family residence on the property. It's pretty much surrounded by single-family residences, as well as vacant properties further out from the development. And this shows the existing zoning in the area there. It's all the properties that are basically in Catawba County are zone R20 residential, and the properties that are in Hickory are zone R1 residential, which is a rural residential district. Basically, staff reviewed the annexation petition and came up with the following findings upon review of the annexation petition. It does comply with all state statutes regarding voluntary annexation. Adequate public services are available and in sufficient quantities, as well as the annexation of the property is not expected to make any of these services fall below acceptable levels. Based upon these findings, staff does recommend approval of the annexation, and I will close and answer any questions that council may have.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. We will open the public hearing in a moment. At the public hearing, we ask first that those who would like to speak against the proposal have 15 minutes to present their arguments. Then we allow 15 minutes by those in favor of the proposal, and we allow 5 minutes of rebuttal and serve rebuttal as well. If one side runs over, we add the minutes on to the available minutes for the other side, and we although mindful of time and each other and courteous, we we will make sure that anyone who wants to speak gets heard. With that, I'll declare the public hearing open and ask if there's anyone who would like to speak against this proposal. Is there anyone who would like to speak for this proposal? There being no one desiring to speak, I declare the public hearing closed and ask for motion or discussion.
Second.
Motion by Meisner, second by Seaver. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. Mr. Berry's budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Prior to opening the public hearing on the manager's recommended 14-15 annual budget, I'd like to do a presentation, a little bit scaled down version since we covered it in so much detail at your last meeting, and also begin by expressing gratitude for, in particular, Karen Hurley and Warren Wood, who really do a lot of heavy lifting putting this budget together over a several-month process, working with departments and various outside organizations. Really appreciate the great work that they do. So when we talk about the 14-15 fiscal year, the total budget is $95.8 million. This is a 6.1% increase over the current budget. But as we talked about last time, there are a couple of relatively large capital projects that pump that number up. When that is accounted for, you're really looking at kind of an operating budget of 2.1%. Cities our size will from time to time have capital expenditures that kind of make those percentages rise and fall. Next year could very well be a much lower number without as much capital being purchased. As we've discussed before, we're seeing very little growth in property tax revenue and property tax base. Natural growth meaning permits, buildings, businesses, homes being constructed in the city and coming on the tax scrolls. The budget is broken into a number of funds, and I'm going to cover those major ones this evening with you. The general fund, which is, I guess the definition's apropos, it's general. That means most of the regular services of the city that you think about, police, fire, etc., parks and recreation, libraries are all funded from the general fund. And the general fund is funded from property tax, primarily, and sales tax and some other fees. As you know, and has been widely reported, I have recommended a 2-penny tax increase. Your current rate is 50 cents per $100 in valuation. I'm recommending that rate go to 52 cents per $100 in value. I feel like this recommendation is needed because of the issues we have with resurfacing the streets throughout the city. And as you'll recall, 3 meetings ago, Mr. Hansen did an extensive presentation on the street resurfacing needs throughout the city. And the summary explanation is that we're currently resurfacing streets on average once every 60 years, and that's beyond the life of a typical street. We feel like we need to increase the paving budget, which is currently about $450,000, that we need to double that to be able to keep our streets resurfaced in a more timely fashion. If you miss certain windows of opportunity to repave a street, as Mr. Hansen illustrated, they degrade quickly and you end up rebuilding streets instead of resurfacing, and then your budget is actually spread even thinner. The second penny is recommended to replace a number of revenue losses, the largest being the hold harmless revenue that the city has received from the state of North Carolina for a number of years and which has been discontinued in the 14-15 budget. The 2-penny increase that I am recommending on the average home in Hickory, the average home being $150,000, would equate to $2.50 per month. That would be the increase in property tax paid by an average residential user. Continuing on the general fund, we are recommending fund balance be appropriated at $1.4 million. Again, a significant piece of that, over $900,000, or right at $900,000, is for the capital replacements that I mentioned. In the general fund, I am recommending 2 new positions for the first time in a number of years. We've been reducing positions. But this year, the police department made a very compelling argument for the need for a digital forensics analyst. With the number of smartphones and other technologies that the police department has to investigate and get data from, it's very time-consuming for our officers to be doing that, and we feel like a specially trained individual in the police department would be more effective at that, helping with our investigations and free up officers to stay on the road. I'm also recommending a fleet maintenance mechanic. As you know, the city runs its own garage. We're very pleased with that cost-effective operation. It provides maintenance on all of our heavy equipment in the street department as well as police vehicles, and need to keep that process and that system moving smoothly. Just to kind of talk a little bit about revenues, I mentioned no natural or very little natural growth in the tax base. We actually had to go out to 3 decimals to find any positive number in the property tax base in the current year, but I guess the backhanded good news is that it's not declining, because over the last 4 years we've actually seen the property tax base decline by 3.5%. And obviously, that being the largest single revenue source of the city, it has been an ongoing challenge year to year to balance the budget when you do not have any growth in revenues. Moving on to the water and sewer fund, it totals $25.8 million. I am recommending a 1.5% increase in rates. That's tagged to the CPI based on direction from council a number of years ago to retreat to make sure that the water and sewer fund stays financially healthy and covers increased operating costs from year to year. Again, if you look at the average homeowner in the city, that equates to 82 cents a month on their monthly bill. We do have a major capital project in the water and sewer fund, and that's the funding of $2 million to construct a sewer line and pump station that will serve the Murray Basin. Just to kind of remind you all and to remind the public, the city and the neighboring communities are fortunate that we run a regional utility system. As you know, the city of Hickory owns the town of Catawba's wastewater treatment plant. We call it the Hickory Catawba wastewater treatment plant. We partnered with Catawba County 2 years ago to upgrade that plant to 1.5 million gallons per day in a 50-50 cost-sharing arrangement. That capital project, the expansion of that plant, is about to be completed, so the budget includes the staff needed to run that plant, which are 3 new wastewater treatment operators. Again, that plant is funded by the revenues generated from the sale of sewer processing and water processing in that area that the plant serves, so southeast Catawba County. And the agreement with Catawba County states that the county will make up any shortfall in revenue over expenditures. So those positions will be supported either from the operation of the system or by Catawba County. We are mandated by the state of North Carolina to have a utility locator in our utility system, and so that is another position that's being recommended. And as you all know, you approved recently an agreement with the town of Longview to both take over their intake, which is upriver of ours, I don't know, just on the other side of the 321 bridge, I suppose, maybe a half a mile or less. And we are providing water sales to the town of Longview, continuing that regional operation of your utility system.
On that utility locator position, do we have the option of using 811, and is that cost effective? They call before you dig?
Well, let me ask Mr. Greer to get up and address that issue.
Mayor, members of council, Mr. Berry, Mr. Crone. To answer your question, Mayor, actually the position is required for us because of 811. 811 now says that everybody has to call into that for locate, but then you have to staff the location yourself. So that's what's requiring us now, is we have to have a computer-based person dedicated to answering those tickets and then responding to those. So it actually is being required because of 811.
Thank you, Mr. Beer. Moving on to our solid waste fund, budget is just under $6 million. We are recommending a $1.50 a month increase in the solid waste fee on each resident's monthly bill to go from $15 to $16.50. That's been a practice, if you will, consistent with council direction from years ago to gradually over time, as the tax base has eroded and not grown, to incrementally shift that cost from tax supported to supported by user fees, and so we're continuing to gradually move in that direction. We do have major capital in the solid waste fee, as we've discussed before. Catawba County is already moving, and the municipalities in Catawba County are all gradually moving to what's known as single stream recycling. That means that we will have large rollouts similar to the trash rollouts that all residents have currently, in which residents can put recycling. More material will be able to be recycled. It won't be sorted at the curb anymore by a Republic employee, but it'll be picked up by trucks similar to our trash trucks. That's part of the capital expenditures. So we look toward the end of the fiscal year to move to single stream recycling and be rolling that out citywide. In other communities, when you go to single stream, your recycling sees an uptick in the volume. People find it easy to do. It'll be picked up every other week and not every week. And more items are able to be recycled. And we're proud of the fact that we are in a community that has historically been at the very top of the state of North Carolina in terms of our recycling per capita, and we're proud of that. Just covering a couple of personnel highlights. We currently have, or it's recommended that we'll have 654 employees. Just by way of comparison, 10 years ago we had 684 full-time employees, and in that last 10 years we have added 6 police officers and 12 firefighters, so that kind of gives you a sense of the reductions that have been made in other city departments to still be down about 5% in our overall workforce, while having added significantly in the 2 public safety departments. We've got a great workforce with the City of Hickory. I'm always proud of the fact, and today was a great example. I was at the Lake Hickory Rotary Club making a presentation, and afterwards one of our great residents came up and shared with me an experience he had where a city crew had been so responsive to a request and taken care of his issue immediately. We've got great co-workers. I get those compliments, and I know you all do too as well. You know, we wish that we were in a financial position and had growth in our revenues in order to recognize them in terms of raises. I am recommending, and all of our raises are based on merit. There is no across the board, there is no cost of living. These raises before you tonight are it. So employees will see their 1.75 if they have a standard rating on their evaluation, and 2.25 if they exceed standards. I'm really proud of the work that Mike Bennett and others have done with our health insurance plan. We are one of the few organizations left that pay 100% of our employees' health insurance costs. And one of the ways we've been able to continue to do that during a budget crunch is to be very, very aggressive in what we're calling compliance-based measures with our workforce. And as we've gone around and talked to the coworkers about that program, we've shared with them the number of pounds we've lost and the BMI that's been reduced and the other key indicators of health that have been impacted in a positive way. I think our coworkers understand that as we are a healthier workforce, that means our health insurance is more affordable, and that means we can continue to pay for health insurance as a city. So next steps this evening, obviously this is the meeting that was advertised for the public hearing. be happy to entertain any questions or discussion that you all have before the public hearing. Obviously, you take comments from the public and have further discussion, and ultimately we would anticipate or ask that you consider a budget, if not this budget, for first reading tonight, so that you could meet your own requirement of 2 readings and have a second reading your June 17th meeting and be ready for July 1st, the new fiscal year. And I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
The hold harmless reimbursement from the state, that we're in the last year of that. This current fiscal year is the last year of that. That's $255,000 that's rolling off.
Yes, sir.
Now, we are budgeting for next year. We do not ever budget increases in sales taxes, do we?
No, we budget, well, we budget the increase that we receive in the current year. So technically, no, we do not project an increase in the budget. That's correct. So
it's conceivable that some or all of that could be offset by increased sales taxes. That'd be a hefty increase in sales tax.
It would be.
Unassigned general fund balance, page 69 of the budget document. Audited financials ending fiscal year 13, we had $13,072,000.
Yep.
That estimated shows us down $2.7 million. Now, something to me, that number seems a little out of whack just on the surface, given what I've heard reported. From the financial reports were given. In other words, what is that? Where does that estimate? Okay, yeah.
Our finance department puts that together, and that's an extremely conservative estimate. It will be made from that.
Then that $10,374,000. Well, okay. So, but we don't. Can you give us a sense of what? I mean, we're making the decisions. What be a reasonable?
13 million.
I mean, have we?
What do we think?
Have we lost $2.7 million since end of fiscal year 13? I can't imagine that we have.
So you're asking, what do we think? What do we think? Not just being conservative for the budget document purposes, but what do we think our fund balance will look like as you wrap up the fiscal year in the next month?
Yeah.
We've had a lot of discussion about that, and Warren spends a lot of time trying to project that, and you can elaborate, Mr. Wood, if you'd like to, but basically we think we'll break about even. We'll think we'll stay about $13 million.
$13 million, which is...
Would you agree with that?
We might put some in the money.
We might add a little bit.
Okay. Ends up being appropriated in the current year because that counts against you for next year.
Right.
Yeah.
But, yes,
but
if we
don't
appropriate the 1.4 out of this year's fund balance,
then that would
for next year.
Right. Right.
So that's $13 million, which is equal to more than 3 months of operating.
On average, during the last decade, we put a few $100,000
right
on average.
That's what drew my mind. Generally, I know that
we did better than that last year.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. That helps clarify that.
Any other comments, discussion? We of course have had months of input and give and take on this, so this is nothing we're hearing tonight's a big surprise, and I always like to say that because I don't want people thinking that we are glossing over the entire financial operation of the city for the next year. We have in fact spent considerable time studying where we are, where we think we're going to be. A lot of people have heard about the privilege license. It has been killed by our legislature, but many of us think it's going to be brought back to life, probably in a little different form, but many of us think it's going to be brought to life. That is an uncertainty in next year's budget. There are other uncertainties in next year, Not the one we're considering tonight, but the following year. We have the privilege license in there this year. But there are a number of uncertainties in 2015-16 that could make that budget year very difficult indeed.
Including revaluation, obviously.
Including revaluation. Well, with that, I'm going to declare the public hearing open and ask if there's anyone who would like to speak against this proposed budget. Is there anyone who would like to speak for this proposed budget? No one desiring to speak, I declare the public hearing closed and ask for motion or discussion. I would like, since nobody spoke up in that first few awkward seconds there, I would like to see us, personal opinion, I'd like to see us roll the paving into the bond referendum. That could either be part of the 40 million, or we could do, say, 42 million. Paving does need to be, we do need to pay more attention to paving. However, I submit that the additional money spent on paving, it is not going to be noticed, to be honest with you. It's just not going to be noticed. First of all, a significant percentage of the miles we drive and the rough pavement we encounter occur on state roads. What we do has nothing to do with what the state will do concerning paving of roads. And I would like to see us take a more wait-and-see approach on the loss of revenues and what will actually happen there. We recognize that long-term, without a dramatic turnaround in our property tax base, and it starts going this way instead of this way or this way, without a dramatic turnaround, holding the line on property taxes is not sustainable. But I think we're going to be asking, it's my opinion only, we're going to be asking the voters to consider what we believe and hope will be a game-changing move to greater investment in our city. And I would feel more comfortable going into it without an immediate tax increase just before we ask them to make that investment with us.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with you completely. Maybe not with the specifics. I'm not necessarily sold on pushing pavement into the bond thing. I think that's an ongoing issue that we're going to have to deal with one way or the other. But I think big picture, I definitely agree with you that we ought to hold the line on our tax rate this year. I don't see it as like the 2 pennies that we're at that have been proposed to us is like, I'm not suggesting holding the tax rate means we don't do the accelerate the street resurfacing. I think one option that we might have is council could work on with its contingency, which is $640,000 budgeted for next year, and take a bite out of that and say that's what we're going to do and make some harder decisions next year. I mean, I think I'd be willing to go to 0.75% of the general fund. Right now, it's budgeted at 1.5% of general fund. Yeah, I'd be willing to go to 0.75% of general fund, and that'd give us $300,000 to put towards paving. And then I'm with you on the wait and see on the revenues. I think that our fund balance, if it will end up at about 13 million, is pretty dang healthy. And so it's not as if we're going to be in a. I wouldn't feel this way if I felt like we were putting ourselves, our staff, our taxpayers, and our citizens in a position where we're going to be really in a crack or in a corner. Now, next budget year is going to be it potentially could be very tough, but we don't know sort of what's going to happen next year. I think this
We don't know what will happen with the economy. We don't know what will happen with the legislature.
We don't know what happened with the bond referendum.
Yeah.
So we don't know what's going to happen with the revaluation. I mean, so I think we're just going to have to play that as it comes to us. I think it's very difficult to sit here and think that we're sort of incrementally getting to some point that we're going to end up at a year from now. I think the conservative approach is to not raise the taxes or not adjust the tax rate. Either take money out of contingency or our general fund balance to accelerate the street resurfacing, and then do the wait and see on the revenue losses. So,
are you suggesting that we appropriate the equivalent of the 2 cents into the fund balance to offset that?
No. My suggestion was we've got a $13 million fund balance, which is more than 25% and more than 3 months worth of operations, which is our policy. So we're above, where we sort of are target, barely, by the way. And maybe we might not be if we appropriate 1.4 million out of it to balance the budget. But I'm saying we could go a little bit below that, maybe get 300,000 out of that contingency, the $640,000 contingency that City Council has, which I think is a little bit. And then, as we continue on into next budget year, I think when things come to us and we want to be able to move and react, we're going to have to make harder. The decisions might be a little bit harder because we won't have that pot of contingency money to gut from.
Are we just prolonging the inevitable by doing that, you think? I mean, obviously, if we don't do the 2 cents this time, then we're going to have to make that up probably in the next budget.
Well, I think politically speaking, from the old man, I've heard a lot of scuttle in the street about the bond referendum and raising taxes. I agree with you there. My only concern is, we've got the digital technician and the mechanic, which I think are pretty important positions to scuttle at this time. So, I agree with moving the pavement repaving into the potential landscaping transportation bucket, but then pulling some of this contingency money for these much needed positions that we're talking about.
Yeah, I didn't hear Mr. Lael say that we were going to go into any particular line item and say no to that.
No, yeah, right. Thank you for clarifying. I'm totally supportive of the positions, and we don't have to go into our contingency to fund those positions. They're already,
Well, I think the staff have, first of all, they've done a marvelous job. For us to have a 50-cent tax rate today versus 55 cents during a seemingly more prosperous time, the year 2000, is just miraculous, and added police and fire. So no, your staff has done a wonderful job with that. This budget is not unrealistic. It's probably a conservative budget compared to what might occur in many similar cities across the state, but we have a conservative approach to governing, and we always have. So I think we're embarking on a course that people are going to view as not conservative. And I think the more conservative years we have behind us, the better we're going to be able to move forward with the new approach. So I'm saying, somebody said, well, that would make 20 years with no tax rate increase. And there is uncertainty. There's always uncertainty. Some years we appropriate fund balance. Most years we appropriate fund balance. Correct me if I'm wrong.
A little bit.
Some years we don't, and a lot of times we don't have to use that.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that this is, again, I'm not saying this is not a prudent budget. I'm just saying we might not have, it might not turn out like we think anyway. And we have a management team who's demonstrated their ability to manage the city with fairly tight revenues.
I don't know of another budget year that we've had so many variables, or going to have so many variables in a period of a year. Really.
Yeah, you're right.
Would it be, I'm just throwing this out there because I don't know the answer to it. Should we maybe consider appropriating the 1 penny for the paving rather than putting it on the bond issue? What would that do for us?
Mr. Wood, what is?
Well, I mean, that's, you basically would, double your paving budget, which is what we've recommended.
Right. I just, for me, and this is just personally for me, it's a maintenance issue, and it's more appropriate in the budget than it is in the bond. That's just me personally.
I would agree with that. It's keeping your house up to date or anything else. You keep those all along rather than trying to lump it in. It's not bond worthy. That's a maintenance issue.
I think you're looking at apples and oranges when you look at resurfacing and maintenance issues versus what we're trying to do with the bonds. And I would consider if, with obviously with better people that understand it better than I do, maybe looking at appropriating it to the fund balance for that instead of putting it in the bond, if Mr. Warren agrees with that and thinks that that's something that we could do.
I mean, that's already in the recommended budget. So what you're talking about is leaving 1 penny in the recommended budget, funding the paving line item, and then the other penny being, which is for lost revenue, being taken from fund balance?
From fund balance.
Okay.
Because we kind of know that we've got what we've got to pay to get roads done. We don't know what the privilege license thing's going to do yet.
Don't know
We don't know. We don't know what the revaluation might do. Chances are revaluations may go down.
And that way we still have the bonds that the citizens can decide on without having the 2% or the 2 penny increase.
I think selling the bond is a major project. And I would much rather have them going in with a clear conscience that this program will certainly increase some of their property taxes, but they just we haven't done one, and then we're going to do another one.
It's not like a double whammy.
And we've demonstrated year after year after year that we're not the kind of council or staff that just looks for an excuse to raise taxes. And I think that's a powerful message when we're talking about the kind of increase we will be talking about if we get a $40 million bond issue.
Because that is all about economic growth to take us from where we are today to where we envision where we need to be and where we think we can go. It is economic development. It's not about just beautification and things like that. It is moving this community forward.
And if you think about the reality of sort of how things work, tax bills go out August, September time frame. People will recognize if they're paying more taxes, right? That's about the same time that we're going to, that potentially there's going to be a lot of discussion going on about a tax rate increase for a bond.
And the time is just not good.
It's not ideal. And so, yeah, I'm.
It seems to me like we accomplished the same thing. It's just a different route.
I'd be for trying to squeeze the orange a little tighter and get that other penny out of fund balance or contingency and go with no tax rate increase.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Well, actually, we're talking about 2 pennies, right? We're actually talking about 2 pennies. One for the paving and the other for the unknown.
Yeah, but I'm saying none.
Yeah, but I'm talking about appropriating it to the fund balance. In essence, is what you're doing.
We're taking it out of fund balance
Right.
and/or contingency.
Right.
I think that's right.
And we are allowing management to accelerate the paving rescheduling schedule without waiting.
Without waiting, that's correct.
And I think it's important, too, to realize that we can't do this every year.
Oh, gosh, no.
I mean, this is kind of, the way I understand it is that this is kind of a one-time shot issue. I mean, we can't continue to do this year after year like this. Take the money from the fund balance.
No, because our percentage
If
would
you
go
had
down.
told me in 2001 that we would sit here in 2014 and say we had not had a rate increase in all that time, I said, you're crazy. It can't happen. We're going to have some things that are going to cause us to do that. And that's without considering how flat the tax base has been.
Also considering what our fund balance percentage was in 2001 to pretty much the same as it is right now. That's unheard of.
And I absolutely believe it's a combination of good personnel and the attitude of the council that you end up being in a position like that.
It's kind of like, the average person. Are we going to take the money out of savings to pay for this deal? Are we going to go take a loan?
Well, I'll make a motion that we accept the budget as presented, except no tax increase.
I'll second, and that's a...
With the stipulation of taking those 2 pennies from fund balance or from the contingency fund. Is that correct?
Yeah. I wouldn't get into, trying to tweak different department.
Yeah, let me
Go ahead.
you want to do this, Lawyer?
Go ahead.
So in your budget packet, you have an annual budget ordinance, okay? It's on page 89, or it's in your, I'm sorry, I was talking about the agenda packet, but in the budget, it's right after.
11.
It's on page what?
11.
Page 11?
11.
Yeah,
Okay.
69.
So what I hear in your discussion is that you would adopt this ordinance, and I've got another ordinance that accomplishes what you're talking about. But the ad valorem taxes would go from 24.4 to 23.5, so you're taking $900,000 out of that revenue line item. And then you would put that $900,000 back in a revenue line item, which is other financing sources, which is includes your fund balance. It includes contingency as well. So you're basically moving the revenue from property tax to other financing sources, so that would go to $3.94 million. Does that accomplish what you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah, from my perspective, it does.
So you would need to adopt the budget resolution with those changes to it that I just went over, and I've actually got the resolution she can put in the minutes.
Is my motion clear enough, or do I need to change it? Or I believe what I propose is exactly
that's how I understood it.
Referred to.
Yeah.
And I'll ask for further discussion.
I guess I'm going to put him on the spot. I'd ask Mr. Warren if that's doable. Is that?
Well, Mr. Berry is his budget.
Well, I know, but you're the money.
Mr. Berry's going to say, ask the council, it's their budget.
Either one of you, is that? I mean, do you see any issues with that? With what we've discussed there? I mean, is there any immediate concerns that you have?
No, I mean, you all have heard our conversation about, we're always trying to look down the road as far as we can and keep from having crises. You are in great financial position. As Mr. Lell's articulated, you've got a very solid fund balance. We believe at the end of this fiscal year, which ends in about 3 weeks, you'll have around $13 million. So which will put you above your 25%. So you're basically saying, we want to dip into that reserve, and in a lot of ways that's what it's intended for rainy days, whether that's replacing bridges that wash out or whatever from the rain.
To keep from raising taxes.
To keep from raising taxes, yep. And
where does that put us on our 25%?
Well, I won't know until the year end closes out, but you could very likely still be right around it. You might be a little below, a little above, but you're not going to drop to 20% or 15 or anything. You're going to be a
So it's going to be right at it.
You're going to be a percent one way or the other around your goal of 25%. So you haven't hurt yourself from that
What's
standpoint.
the trigger that you get a notice from the?
Oh, it's 8%.
8%.
Yeah, I
really
mean, so
small,
that's
yeah.
not even in consideration. And
We're
you
not even close.
you'd want to stop well before that going out
yeah.
for bonds. I mean, the bond rating companies are going to want to look at this city and say, yep, this is a strong financial city. This won't hurt your financial strength from the bond raters, I don't think. I mean, you're talking, in the scheme of things, a relatively minor move of your fund balance.
And hopefully we won't have that 1,000-year rain again this year.
That's right.
Well, and this is an unusual year, obviously, for us because of the bond issue.
And the legislature.
But I would really like to go into that bond issue very positive, and all of these things we're going to be doing in the bond, and not the citizens not say, well, gee, I just got a tax increase before.
I think this is a wise decision.
Yeah, I think so.
And we are not weakening our city. In fact, I'm going to joke with you, sort of, and say that if we get one of those letters from the local government commission, now I'll be signing. So,
That's right. Congratulations.
You hand-deliver it to us.
I'll be signing. No, you recuse yourself if you want to do something favorable. If you want to write a nasty letter, you don't recuse.
Write yourself a letter.
Yeah. But we are very fortunate here, and I'm not going to pass out any more kudos on to the people who are responsible for that. But we're fortunate here, and it means we have a lot more flexibility with our citizens, our taxpayers, than some communities do. There are communities the local government commission sends them a notice. This is what your taxes will be next year. If you don't, we're going to take over your city. Okay? There's not many of that in North Carolina, but it's there. So we are very fortunate. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. It's unanimous. Thank you, staff. You've done a wonderful job.
Great job.
Thank you. Got a good team.
I hope John.
Moving on to departmental reports, I'll ask Mr. Mac McLeod, City's Parks and Rec Director, to come to the podium and give council a wonderful update on the improvements that are going on at the Zara Baker Park and specifically the treehouse.
Mayor Wright, members of council, Mr. Berry, Mr. Crone, good evening. What I'd like to do for a few minutes is I want to take you back approximately 3.5 years and then bring you back to tonight. This picture is at Kiwanis Park at the playground. This picture was taken in January of 2011. This was what the playground at Kiwanis Park looked like then. We'll take you on February 14th, 2011. A press conference was held at Kiwanis Park announcing the plans for the fundraising campaign by the Kiwanis clubs of Catawba County for the Zara Baker All Children's Playground. Once that started, Site Solutions, which is a planning firm in Charlotte, was gracious enough, as part of their contribution to the project, was to do a conceptual plan. So we had a step-by-step plan for development of the playground. And as you can see, this plan was put together shortly after the press conference was put together, and here almost 3.5 years later, basically what was on paper is now becoming reality. You can see there in the top left-hand corner the plans where we have plans for another picnic shelter. We anticipated the use of the playground would exceed the capacity of the shelters we had there, so we had plans for a playground. Down at the parking lot, we also knew we needed eventually additional restroom
facilities there. So through the planning process, we took this conceptual plan, and I'm pleased tonight to be presenting to you where we are taking what you see now, turning that vision into now reality, what is on the ground now. I want to take you to November 16, 2011. We had the groundbreaking ceremony on what would have been Czar's 11th birthday. April 12th, 13th, and 14th, 2012, we had a community build. What a great 3 days. What a great 3 days we had. We had almost 300 people come out and help us over those 3 days build a playground. Culmination, May 19th, 2012, we had our dedication ceremony, ribbon cutting. Since that time, I'll take you back, we talked conceptual plan, the need for a picnic shelter, additional picnic shelter, restroom facilities. Well, here's the new playground now. That's the same picture. Take you back 3.5 years ago, you saw that playground. That's in the exact same location as to what it looks like today. Like I said, we talked about the need for additional picnic facilities and restrooms.
Mr. McClung, could I interject? Can you go back to that previous one?
Yes, sir.
You see the swings here, the green framing and the black seats? That leftmost swing is wheelchair accessible.
Yes, sir.
By making a reservation, which is done to preserve the equipment, a parent can situate a wheelchair, a child in a wheelchair, and they can swing there next to their brothers, sisters, and friends.
Currently under construction at the park is our new combination picnic shelter restroom facility. It was designed to where you're looking at, so the picnic shelter can be reserved at the same time, be used at the same time the restrooms are used by the park. To let you know, we've already started receiving calls, people wanting to take advance reservations, which we unfortunately don't do that. Here's another shot of the picnic shelter, restroom that's in a picnic shelter. Here's a panoramic view of the picnic shelter. Then an interior shot of the picnic shelter.
Excuse me, Matt, do you have any idea how many people that could fit under that shelter there?
Mr. C, we've got designed for, there's 10 8-foot tables, so we can get 60 to 75 under there. What brings us now to today is the treehouse. One of the final visions I know Mayor Wright had for when he and I first talked 3.5 years ago about his project was a treehouse that would be accessible to children of all abilities. So what you see here tonight is these are conceptual drawings of the treehouse. This shot you're looking at would be if you were standing on the sidewalk. Is the view from the sidewalk. This is also another view. Basically, if you're standing at the rear of the new picnic shelter, this would be your view because the ramp coming off will connect into the sidewalk that leads down to the playground and also to the picnic shelter. This is a shot of, as you can see, it's being built around an existing tree on site, and this is a view of the tree house from actually the playground. If you're at the playground, this is just a side view. If you're coming up from the existing parking lot, coming up through the Memorial Plaza, that would be your view of the playground. And then just another shot of the tree house. This is just another shot looking back looking back off the sidewalk. The treehouse project cost, the total project cost is $33,000. All construction costs are being funded with private donations that have been deposited into a City of Hickory donations account. There are several thank yous I'd like to make tonight. For, as you can see up here, special thank yous. First to the Western Catawba County Kiwanis Club and the Hickory Kiwanis Clubs, who were the two driving forces behind what we have now at the Czar Baker All Children's Playground. Ernie Seals with CBSA Architects donated his design service, architectural services for the treehouse. And Hickory Construction Company has made a substantial donation towards the playground. So, I just would like to personally and professionally thank those four entities for what they've done specifically with the treehouse project. So there's a recommendation before you tonight. Staff recommends approval of a contract in the amount of $33,000 with Hickory Construction Company for the construction of the Czar Baker All Children's Playground Treehouse. And Mr. Mayor, before council takes up consideration of staff's recommendation, Steve Aaron, who was the fundraising chair for the Czar Baker All Children's Playground, is here tonight, and with your permission, I'd like to ask Steve to come up and say a few words. Steve.
Thank you, Mac. Mayor, council, men and women, ladies and gentlemen. I moved to this city 29 years ago next month. And I quickly fell in love with this city because its progressiveness, its ability to create partnerships with various organizations in this community to enhance the life, the living in this community. And I've done many things, but chairing this campaign and seeing this playground take place is certainly one of the most greatest satisfactions I've had. It has become so successful that unfortunately we as Kiwanians now understand that this park is no longer called the Kiwanis Park. It is Czar Baker Park. That's what people refer to it, and that's okay. It's a testament to the success of what has happened. And I will tell you that we are being recognized all over North and South Carolina and around the country for this particular project. I have been asked to speak at the Kiwanis Convention in August to talk about this project and the unique partnership between Civic Club and the city and how this came to be. And, I just want to say thank you to the Parks and Recreation Department. It's been a great partnership, and this treehouse and the approval of that is just one more addition to making this probably the #1 destination park in this city. So thank you very much.
Well, I would like to thank Mr. Aaron and Mr. Seaver and the other Kiwanians.
Mr. McLeod, back as a Kiwanian.
Mr. McLeod, I think you got drafted into that after you got involved in this, didn't you? Well, I also want to thank them for what they did, and I want to thank our Parks and Recreation staff for coordinating this, expediting it, and helping us get to where we are today. This would cost much more than $33,000 if it weren't for the donations we've gotten. And what I like most about this park, and I have grandchildren who I take to the park, and in addition to the children of all abilities using it, that is a true melting pot of Hickory people who share that park. And it is a wonderful experience. I just can't say enough about it. And I'm going to let somebody else have the honor of making the motion to approve that.
I move approval, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Seaver, second by Ms. Patton. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous.
Next department report, I'll ask Mr. Dave Leonetti, Community Development Manager for the city, to come forward and present to council a vacant building revitalization and demo grant.
Thank you, Mr. Berry, Mayor Wright, members of council, Mr. Crone. Tonight, I'm here to present a vacant building revitalization grant application that we received from Holbrook Landscaping for the revitalization of a mill building at 2146 Highland Avenue Northeast. Little background, the program allows for grants of up to $30,000 or 15% of eligible project costs for the rehabilitation of vacant buildings. As a point of reference, in order to qualify for the maximum, you need to spend $200,000 upgrading a vacant building. This is the 6th application we've received since the guidelines were amended in 2011. The property is located at 2146 Highland Avenue Northeast. It's approximately a 55,000 square foot building. As I said previously, it's owned by Holbrook Landscaping, LLC. Previous use was a number of different furniture and cushion manufacturing operations. I'm not 100% sure exactly what was in there previously. It's been vacant for a very long time. There's been some dry storage since I've lived here, but in terms of actual manufacturing operations, it's probably been 10, 15 years, I believe. The applicant plans to spend $230,000 approximately on repairs to the roof, updates to the electrical and HVAC systems, and new landscaping. There's also some interior improvements that aren't included in that total. The building would be eligible for a grant of $30,000 approximately, and the applicant plans to use the facility for the landscaping business. To give you a little bit of an idea of where we're talking about, just over this way is Shuford Mills and the intersection of Springs Road and Highland Avenue. Got the Wizard Lounge right there. McDonald Parkway to the east. So you're basically halfway between McDonald Parkway and Springs Road along Highland Avenue.
Oh, okay.
Just some photos of the existing site. They're also going to be sealing the parking lot. The Business Development Committee, at their most recent meeting, reviewed the proposal and recommends approval. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No, but this is great for that area with the H.H. Shuford demolition. And if anybody needs to go by there and see what Z-Loop has landscaped, that area, it looks beautiful.
Flowers and everything.
I think the whole revitalization of that area is certainly coming through.
You know, do we know what's going to be in there? What Doug's going to do, that's going to be good.
What's his Holbrook's? It's the landscaping company. He's going to have all of his offices, and I believe he's going to be parking his trucks there and using a lot of that as warehouse space for his business.
The office warehouse.
Yep.
I would say those brownfield grants we've been getting has helped open up a lot of those things for revitalization.
Yes, and this property also did receive some funding from that EPA brownfields grant as well.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Guest, second by Mr.
Zagaroli tonight.
Zagaroli.
He made the motion. Motion by Zagaroli.
He needs a badge for his
Eisner. We're going to have to do this with.
I'll make a motion we get the mayor here now.
Let's get some red light. Whoever gets the light on first, he kills all the red. Okay. I think
personally,
City Clerk, after that foolishness, you got that right.
I have motion by Zagaroli and second by Meisner.
That's correct.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Another inspiring space.
You have to tell me.
Citizen briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The final departmental report this evening I will make, and what I wanted to do after, thank you, Mike, after your meeting last week and conversation about the bond referendum was to make formally before this body, and I know a number of you all have seen all of it or bits and pieces of it, but the presentation that Ms. Surratt and I are making throughout the community. This will be my fourth one today, third, fourth one, anyway. So that you all would see and hear exactly what we, your staff, are saying out in the community about the bond referendum, about that plan moving forward. And if you will humor me, I don't think I can make this presentation sitting down. I haven't done it yet sitting down. And so I'm going to go ahead and just stand up and do it like I would do it if it weren't in council chambers in such a formal setting, and pretend like we're more like in a civic club or some other organization, and give you the chance to address the community as well as the council before meetings. So really, just to kind of give you a sense of how many organizations that have already heard the presentation, that's the list, and these are planned. So Ms. Surratt and I have been just going crazy and having a ball doing it. Really appreciate her helping out with it. So to talk about how we move forward, you really in some ways have to look back first. And you have to look at what is the present reality for Hickory and even beyond Hickory, really our MSA. And this chart is probably not a surprise to anyone in that if you look at MSAs in North Carolina metropolitan statistical areas, since 2000, all of them in North Carolina, Hickory is by far the worst in terms of job loss. Over 45,000 jobs, or 24% of our workforce, lost in that 12-year period of time. Second important chart, and looking at our reality, and somewhat obviously has connections with the job loss, is what's going on with our population since the 2000 census. Some of this is impacted by the natural demographic change trends with the baby boomers that are taking place all over the country. I mean, obviously the country is aging. But when you look at this key demographic of 20 to 44-year-olds, that is a very troubling trend for any community. If you are losing the people who start jobs, who have children, who start businesses, have children, fill important jobs, are vibrant and active in your community, that does not bode well for the future of any community. Of course, organizations, leaders in the community have not just wanted to accept that. And these organizations and others have come together to say, let's chart a course forward. Started with what was called an economic competitiveness plan, engaged the services of the Southern Growth Policies Board and a gentleman named Ted Abernathy, who's widely known throughout the Southeast for economic development planning in communities. A couple of very specific things have come out of those planning processes. Now, who here has heard of Inspiring Spaces? Raise your hand. Come on. I know you've heard of it. Okay. So who is willing to take the clicker from me and now explain to the rest of the program what Inspiring Spaces is? And we have a member who's heard this presentation, but Don's even wondering if he's willing to do it. Well, exactly. That's kind of the point. The point is that this process began several years ago. Very inclusive, over 500 city residents involved in this process. Focus groups, surveys, etc. Many of you in this room were involved in that, not just the city staff. I'm very proud of that fact. I think council's proud of the fact that we've really reached out and engaged the community. And how do we move forward? This isn't 2 or 3 folks sitting in a room putting together a plan for the whole community. It's the community putting together a plan. Somewhat simultaneous, a little bit following our lead, I would say, was a program called Innovate Catawba. A little bit more generated by the Chamber of Commerce, if you will. A lot of business leaders involved in that process as well. And I'm not going to spend tonight talking about the detailed way that these two plans overlap, but they do, by design. I'm going to spend more of the time talking about how are we moving forward in Hickory and what is the plan to go forward. So, City Council appoints a committee of 15, with Don Norwood being one of those members, to basically say go from this broad input of over 500 residents and hundreds of good ideas and get this narrowed down to a plan that we can take to the voters in a bond referendum that we can use to move the city forward, to change that trend in those first two charts of losing jobs and losing population. That's tough work. And the committee worked very hard, and we were deeply grateful to them. 2 meetings ago, they gave you their final report. Stephen Shuford came before you and presented that to you. So basically, what you're hearing and what we are presenting to the community is that plan. Okay? 4 major initiatives and projects to move us forward. So the first one is really taking a look at the lake and the river, the waterfront that's in Hickory. City council members and committee members, as they went out and looked at other communities, they realized that, wow, communities that have a lake or a river have figured out ways to use that for the broader benefit of the entire community in a way to generate retail growth, residential growth. Now in Hickory, we've been blessed obviously with the lake and river for a long time, but it's been developed almost exclusively as high-end residential, which is great. That's fine. You want that in your community. But everybody kind of realized, there might be another opportunity here that we have overlooked that would make us more competitive. About the time that these conversations are going on, Mr. Robert Lackey, a great business leader in the community, lost his beloved wife, Deidre. I remember how much that impacted Andrea when she read the full page obituary. And ironically, a couple of days, a week or two later, Mr. Lackey called the city wanting to know how he could construct a mausoleum in her honor at the Oakwood Cemetery. And the call was actually fielded by Andrea. She knew about his wife. And Andrea was really one that kind of planted the seed with Mr. Lackey to say, well, Mr. Lackey, maybe there's something you could do for the community that would be broader and have more impact and honor your wife other than a mausoleum at the Oakwood Cemetery. That has evolved into a $3 to $5 million gift to this community from the Lackey family to be done at Bud Geithner Park on the lake, and to be an event space and a conservatory. What you see there is the lake house, which is one of the structures being planned as part of that. So the committee recognized, wow, this is a wonderful opportunity we have. Why don't we try to piggyback on that private donation and see how far we can take it in the community to maximize our waterfront for a competitive advantage. And the concept was developed to create a river walk to basically connect Bud Geithner Park all the way over to the baseball stadium. And the baseball stadium, the city just finished a renovation. Anybody been out there yet? Seen it? Mm-hmm. What do you think? It's pretty good stuff, right? $1.4 million spent, your dollars appropriated by your city council to do that project. About $1 million from Hickory Baseball put into it, so a nice public-private partnership there. The idea being that around the baseball stadium, we can have the opportunity to develop what I like to call the next Catawba Valley Boulevard. Okay, so bear with me for a second. Catawba Valley Boulevard really anchored the city of Hickory for 20 years as the regional hub for retail and shopping. And I'll come back to that example in this. I'm going to stay with it for a second. The committee, staff, felt like, we have an opportunity out there at the lake around the baseball stadium to do something really special. Now, I'm not talking about big box stores being built out there. That's not the next generation of retail. The next generation of retail that you see in other communities is mixed use, okay? Could be shops, smaller shops on the first floor, residences upstairs, entertainment opportunities in that area. Ironically, when the city was renegotiating with Hickory Baseball to do the improvements to the baseball stadium, I sat down with Don Beaver at his office at Rock Barn, and one of the things he said to me is, why can't we put the baseball stadium downtown? Where she's building, and just finished the baseball stadium in Charlotte downtown, right? And I said to him, I said, well, Don, I don't see the city being willing to rebuild a stadium when we got a perfectly good stadium. Maybe we just need to rethink this. Maybe instead of trying to bring the stadium back downtown, maybe we need to bring downtown out to the stadium. That idea was already being kicked around. And oh, by the way, you got this great water out there that's not getting used. You might have something really special there. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. So just a little bit more about where we start with this project, with the Riverwalk, and with this park opportunity with the Lackeys. Again, this is a layout, a couple of different structures, the conservatory and indoor-outdoor garden, just very special, unique place that we don't have currently anywhere in our region. Mr. Lackey's vision is really build more gardens on a much smaller scale, but that same type of a conservatory. And then the opportunity for an entertainment space, a place where people can have wedding receptions, and a really special public place and structure here on the waterfront. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into the plan in lots of detail, but it is being developed in conjunction with city staff and others. So the Riverwalk concept is something of substance. We're not talking about an improved fisherman's trail. We're talking about a built space. We're talking about something that's lit, something that has wood and asphalt, concrete, and brick, something like these pictures that you see, something that as people are traveling from Caldwell County into Catawba County across the 321 bridge, it's obvious, it's seen, it's a gateway, it's an entrance into Hickory. And when I talk about the next Catawba Valley Boulevard, I mean, these are pictures from Burkdale Village. Has anybody been to Burkdale? Okay, I mean, obviously Burkdale's huge. It's bigger than the space we would have. But to scale, that's the type of development that we think has potential there. Again, that mixed use, smaller retail, residential, but really, again, a community type of hub where people can enjoy the water. There's shopping, there's entertainment, there's opportunities for public enjoyment of that water, as well as private development. So again, just to kind of orient everybody, there's Bud Gagner Park, that's where the Lackey project is planned. The city already owns all of this real estate along here with all of this lakefront. Obviously, we already have greenways that wrap around through this space that are widely used, but we're really talking about staying right along the water. Highway 321 bridge is planned and funded to be replaced in 2017. It will fly over the railroad tracks, so it's going to be elevated significantly, creating an opportunity to take the Riverwalk underneath the 321 bridge. Think about this being the more passive side, this being the more active commercial side. And so you look at all of this real estate, which is not owned by the city, but people who have development connections with the individuals have already started expressing some interest in the potential for that to be developed. Plays off the baseball stadium, also has potential linkage back into the downtown along the rail corridor. When you talk about return on investment, return on your investment as taxpayers of the city of Hickory, public investment, I want to come back to the Catawba Valley Boulevard example. Now, who was here in 97 when Catawba Valley Boulevard was built? Okay. Now, I was here, and I didn't work for the city at the time, and I remember when I first heard about that, I have to admit, I chuckled. And I thought, the city's lost it. There is nothing out there. Because you remember at the time, it was like you had the mall, then you had nothing. I mean, it took some vision to recognize there was potential behind the mall. It was just, you have 70, you have the mall, what else could there be? But the city had the vision, spent $3 million, partnered with DOT, built Catawba Valley Boulevard, and what has happened? $55 million of private investment, hundreds of thousands of square feet of retail, again, the anchor of Hickory as the regional shopping destination for the last 20 years. An incredible return on investment, $275,000 in property tax every single year. In the neighborhood of $1 million in sales tax generated. That is fantastic return on taxpayer investment. And jobs, retail jobs, hundreds of retail jobs that we would not have otherwise had. Fast forward a little bit to 2010, Smaller scale, but a similar type of example. Lenore Ryan Boulevard being built by DOT, very expensive, have to build a new rail bridge, etc. But still, DOT standards are build a strip of asphalt and we're done. City Council recognized the opportunity to make some improvements there. And I'm not going to say that the mill redevelopments are solely because the city went out and put in lights, curb and gutter, sidewalk, and plantings and dressed it up, but it helped. It was a piece of that. The city's vacant building program kicked in. Incentives were provided to help the mills redevelop. All of that done publicly, all of that part of the natural process. But less than $200,000 of citizen taxpayer dollars have been invested there. Over $18 million already in private investment, paying $90,000 in property tax. I don't even care how you slice it. That is a good return. We think we have that same opportunity with the waterfront. And that nice case, I keep saying we, the committee, you know, that this is basically their recommendation with staff's been involved in all those conversations, and at the personal level, I'm excited to agree with them. It's hard to curb my enthusiasm. So that's kind of project number one. Project number two, you shift gears a little bit and you look at the city's central business district. Okay? And you look at the opportunities that have already taken place with the mill redevelopments. We're going to touch on those in more detail. But if you look at Main Avenue and you look at the rail corridor, we basically orient you on this map a little bit. There it is. Okay, so we're coming right into Lenore Ryan, and farther over here, you're coming right into the downtown area, West Hickory over here. Okay, north, south. If you look at this map, each of these little orange blocks here are either non-existent structures now, today, or are underutilized or dilapidated facilities. There is a ton of opportunity for development to take place in the central business district of Hickory. Residential units are very trendy. That is exactly the kind of environment that 20 to 40-year-old employees want to be in. Now, obviously, Hickory's not going to be able to go to scale to Charlotte or Raleigh. We're not that big. But we can take those same concepts and scale them down to Hickory and have that urban core opportunity. Just give you a couple of visuals of what we're talking about and what I've started calling a city walk, just to kind of help people wrap their head around what we're talking about. Okay? So this is the part where I focus you guys on Hickory Daily Record. And I say, you know, the Hickory Daily Record loved coming out with a headline about the $36 million sidewalk. They beat us about the head and shoulders with it. Okay? Well, that's fair. If in your business, every time you had a strategic planning session and the newspaper was there, you would know that, you know, all kinds of ideas and headlines, that's fine. That's just the business we're in. We did that. But my point is it's still a great idea. It won't be $36 million. But transportation is critical to economic development. Just like roads are critical, so is pedestrian transportation, especially to the next generation. Okay? They want to be in a walkable, bikeable community. That's the communities that are buzzing and growing with younger folks have those amenities by and large. And again, we think that there's the opportunity to do something special in the central business district that moves pedestrians and spurs growth. So just to orient you again a little bit, this is a cutaway, Highway 127. This is where the Transportation Insight Project is. We're going to talk about that in a little more detail. The potential for a pedestrian bridge, either as part of the existing Main Avenue Bridge or another just dedicated pedestrian bridge. But basically, creating these great linkages into the central business district and creating great gateways as well. So just to remind you, the reason that I think this is so doable is because this isn't just Cal or Brian, great city planners, sitting in a room dreaming up these ideas. When you have business people putting millions of dollars of their own into projects in an area, that tells you that something is going on there, that you've got something that you can continue to perpetuate, and that's exactly what we've seen. Holler Mill, we're all familiar with that, and guess what? It's also generating jobs. Now, I know I've taken a little bit of flack and criticism to say, well, those are restaurant jobs. You know what? Those are good jobs. Those are a lot of times jobs that 20, 30-year-olds take as they're finishing their educations, as they're deciding what they want to do, or permanent. I mean, you know, we don't have dedicated cable channels to cooking because cooking is, you know, not important. It's part of what goes on. Moretz Mill, we're familiar with that. His headquarters, his mixed-use development, 100 to 200 jobs will go in there. This one is really interesting, and I don't know that many people realize this, okay? So far we've touched on everything on the east side of Highway 127. Now let's zip all the way down Main Avenue, all the way down the railroad corridor to the old Piedmont Wagon building. Y'all know where that is? Yeah, one of the great old buildings in this community. One of the very first centers of economic development, making wagons and shipping them all over the place. Well, that was purchased. The city council gave a redevelopment grant. Cornerstone United is building their headquarters there. Okay? So again, we really think we have the opportunity to continue that trend of service jobs, headquarter jobs, etc. in our central business district and link all of this together. Okay? And the city walk becomes an important part of that. Now, one of the things that the committee also recognized was the opportunity to take that city walk and connect it to the river walk. Okay, so that's, you know, that's where we get into. I got to pick with you, John. That's where we get into John Tinklenberg's, you know, sidewalk from Lenore Rhine to the lake. That's okay. I mean, yeah, that's basically the concept. Is let's link all these things together so that people can really see and connect all the different parts of the city. Okay? And that's exactly the kind of amenities that we see in other communities. That's the kind of amenities John's going to have when he moves. I just got to have fun. This is our way of saying bye.
It's his last night.
I know.
He can't do anything. It's his last night.
Oh, yeah, you can write a headline.
So you can write a story about how you were part of the story.
John, no new taxes.
And I like to pick John. I've known his family for a long time, and one of his younger sisters, I coached her in some sports, and that's a great family. We're going to miss you. Let's talk a little bit about Transportation Insight and how key that project is to all of this, okay? And again, how it demonstrates to me that the private sector is already getting ahead of us, if you will, in making their investments. So Paul Thompson, who's the founder and chairman of Transportation Insight, a great local business leader, we heard about 3 years ago that he had bought property on I-40 and was going to be moving out of the downtown area. He is currently in 2 leased spaces. He's outgrown them. He wants to create a more permanent corporate headquarters and grow and expand significantly. Scott Millar and I heard about that. Some council members were involved in that as well. We basically said we cannot let that happen. And I've still got the binder sitting on my desk that Scott and I put together about 3 years ago or so to start pitching Paul different ideas that would keep him here, keep him in town. And Lyerly Mill really started resonating with him. But I will tell you, in the sales process to keep Transportation Insight growing in Hickory, the piece that sealed the deal was I brought Paul into an Inspiring Spaces Committee meeting. On the conference table in the planning conference room, we had laid out the aerial photograph of the city walk. We had rolled over the top of it the Mylar that showed how all this could be connected together. And as Paul looked at that, as we showed him where transportation, or where the Lyerly Mill was in relationship to it and everything, I am not a great salesman, but I saw it in his eyes. I knew we had it. We just had to work out the details. I knew that that was exactly what he was looking for his company, for his employees. He's in logistics. He hires a lot of college graduates straight out of school with business backgrounds. A lot of them work, and I'm making his speech for him. He needs to make the speech himself because he tells it better than I do, but a lot of them work in Charlotte and drive up here. He didn't want that going on. He wants them to see the revitalization of this community, and he wants to be part of it. So his campus goes from beyond just being this building, but is, you know the construction that's going on out there right now. Y'all know what I'm talking about? City Shoe Shop. City Shoe Shop. You hear that, you know exactly where I'm at, right at that corner. Construction's already going on there. He's got all of this next to it that is going to be part of his corporate campus. Of course, he was here in council chambers explaining to City Council his vision and his plan. I'm going to have to pick on you one more time, John. It's a story. It's like page 4. It's a huge deal. A huge deal to have a corporate headquarters stay committed to the city and grow to a minimum of 400 jobs right here in our central business district. Just a fantastic project. So that's the second piece of it. So let's recap. You've got the Riverwalk. You've got that opportunity for commercial and residential development in a great public space. Anchor us as a retail hub for the next 20 years. You've got the City Walk, staying committed to our central business district and growing the trend that's already taking place of corporate headquarters and service jobs right there in an environment where young folks want to work, want to be. Then the committee kind of said, let's look at the overall city. And let's look specifically at our gateways. What are we saying in our transportation corridors about our community? Are we saying there's a lot going on here? This is a place you need to think about? Are we even cognizant of the fact that we have gateways and we want to make them special and important? And we got to look at our overall transportation network. Okay? And it hurts me to say this as the city manager of the city of Hickory, but our transportation network is no longer competitive. And what I mean by that is they are streets, and you can get from point A to point B on them. Might have some cracks and potholes, might not. But when you go to other communities, you see a street network that is a whole nother level. Okay? They are prettier. They are more conducive to bikes and to pedestrians. Okay? Just that simple. And our transportation corridors and our gateways are our curb appeal in this community. And as I see it, and I think as this committee sees it, and I hope the community sees it, we are trying to market and sell this community for population and job growth. And when you come into our community from one of these major transportation areas, what is your impression? Is Hickory a worn-out mill town? Or has Hickory got something going on? I'll share with you a quick example and then we'll move on. Highway 70, okay, where the car dealerships are. Mike Johnson spent millions of dollars. Nissan spent millions of dollars. Honda has spent money. Chevy has spent money. Ford has, all of the dealerships have made major investments over the last 3 or 4 years there. And Highway 70 South, and yes, it is a DOT roadway, but what I tell you about DOT, they build strips. If you want anything other than a strip of asphalt, you're going to have to do it. Look at Highway 70 right there, and it looks like crap. I can't say that, Council Chambers. You know, the medians are broken. What medians we have are broken and deteriorating. I mean, it is an awful roadway to look at. That's just not competitive anymore. Our investment, our public investment in some ways needs to follow the private investment in cases like that, but it also can lead the private investment. And those gateways are critical too, and there's a lot of discussion with the committee about what do we do, especially at I-40 and at 321, where major traffic nodes are coming into the city. What are we going to do there? It says to the community, you come into a place that's worth investing in. Okay, whether you're staying, whether you live here, whether you're shopping, whatever your purpose is, it creates, as the mayor says, creates a buzz, creates a sense of place in the overall community. Okay, so that's item number 3. And now we're going to move a little bit away from the work that the Inspiring Spaces Committee did and get into work more that's been primarily done by myself and Scott Millar, because we had to keep it very confidential until we could get it all put together. But it's a new business park. Okay, an opportunity for job growth in a brand new business park that would be within the city limits of the city of Hickory. Almost 180 acres currently, with the potential to expand by another 100 acres. Okay, Let me orient you a little bit to where this is. Well, let me tell you about the name first. 1764. When we first started doing some research on properties and opportunities where we thought a business park could be in Hickory, we found this series of properties and started doing title research that Mr. Crone's office did. We were able to go all the way back to an original land grant from King George III in 1764 to the Crowder family. We thought, man, that's cool. That's something that people care about in the community. That's something that's marketable. We want to keep that. Because in a lot of ways we see this park as connecting us to our past, but moving us also to our future. All right, so for orientation purposes, Chief, you know what I'm going to say, right? Chief Atkins? I got to. It's just so much fun. All right, so here's Robinwood Road. Here is Startown Road, okay? CDCC is about right there. Yeah, right there. Highway 70, 40, Top Valley Boulevard. You got it? Got the location? In case you don't, Krispy Kreme donuts. All right, that's what I always mess with. All I got to do is say, where's Krispy Kreme? And they're like, yeah, we know what you're talking about. Okay, so Krispy Kreme is right there.
Friday is National Donut Day.
Show Robinwood Road and Startown Road is parallel that Robinwood runs into Startown.
It does.
No, yeah, they do. I mean, up here, further up. It takes a turn right past the business park, and then Robinwood comes into it right there at that intersection. Okay. Some of the things that make this very attractive is you have major water lines running down both the roads. The city already has a major sewer line running at the south part of the property. You have great access to 321, great access to I-40. The way the park is structured is that the EBC has options that tie up this property for 7 years, okay? And they have, of course, the backing of 50-50 partnership with the city of Hickory and Catawba County. The county commissioners will actually be responsible to rezone the property because, of course, it is not currently in the city limits. But the option contracts require that it be annexed by the city voluntarily before the property can be sold. Obviously, I'm not going to spend 5 years of my life working on this if it's not going to benefit this city and this city's budget. Really think it's an opportunity for a Class A business park. We've gone out and we've looked at a business park called Trayburn in Durham County, in fairly rural Durham County. Business parks are a lot like neighborhoods in that they can have restrictions that say what you can and can't build there. We have Trayburn's restrictions. We've been assessing those and analyzing which of those would apply here and make sense. Trucking and distribution companies are very important to our economy, very important to our region. I have nothing against them, but that's not what we're talking about here. And council's heard me say this before. You get a little close to these things when you spend so much time working on it. But I really feel like this is almost a bit of a birthright. Not only is that property historic, but in some ways it's a once in the next 10-year, maybe 20-year opportunity for this city to do projects in a business park that are game-changing in conjunction with the other projects we just talked about. And that's not going to happen with distribution. It's got to be Class A, it's got to be high-end, advanced manufacturing. Lots of jobs, lots of good jobs. That we feel like we're very good at, and we do have spaces that work for those types of companies. We are able to recruit them. And again, you're talking, that has the potential of 1,000 to 5,000 jobs. So when you think about 1764, seeing Bob sitting here kind of triggers my thoughts going way back to the 70s. You got to think about the kind of impact that GE had when it came to this community. You got to think about the kind of impact that Secor had, that Corning had, that still continue to have. That's the type of long-term opportunity that we're talking about in Project 1764, Park 1764.
I'm sorry I keep talking and then not to y'all. I apologize.
We've heard
No,
we've
good
heard
stuff.
We've heard most of it.
my second time in the last few hours.
Good. Repetition is the best teacher, right? Right, Mr. C?
That's right.
Over and over again. Well, y'all know that.
That's right, I need it.
Okay, so let's just kind of recap again. Let's talk about what are the public investments we're talking about being made as you look at each of these. So when you talk about the waterfront opportunity, you're talking about roads, utilities, Riverwalk, roads and utilities primarily on the baseball stadium side as you think about a Burkdale-style village being developed there, partnership with the private sector. Riverwalk itself being developed on the city side, if you will, the more passive side. You look at the central business district, in some ways a lot of the same things. The city walk, street improvements, common areas. We've already talked about the commercial centers and our transportation corridors, significant street improvements, gateways, wayfinding, signage, things like that that are important to taking our roadways to the next level. And then in a business park, berms, entrances, utilities, roads. Now, do you see anything on that list that makes you think, well, that's not the kind of stuff cities should be doing? I would argue with you and posit that that's exactly the things that cities do and have always done. We have always been in the transportation business, always will be. We have always been in the utility business, always will be. The issue is, are we going to be in the utility and transportation business from the last 20 and 30 years, or are we going to be in the business for the next 20 and 30 years? Are we going to provide products that are competitive, that are similar to what you see in other communities? And I think that's almost the question that gets asked as you move forward into the bond referendum. So those are the types of investments that the city would make. Now, how does it get paid for? There are always grant opportunities out there. So if you look at the dollar bill here, let's say this is the private dollars, these are the public dollars, and we've kind of got a continuum here. Federal and state grants are always a possibility. In fact, we just found out last week that the Lyerly Mill project got a $500,000 state grant that we had applied for. That's great. That helps that project move forward. I'm going to skip over the city bonds. We'll come back in that second. Fees are an important part. As you build infrastructure, the businesses a lot of times will pay for parts of that infrastructure. They'll have to pay to tap on and to use it. That's going to generate some of the revenue that will help fund these. Donations and philanthropy are a key piece. Obviously, the Lackey donation is huge, very important to the whole Riverwalk concept. And I think that the committee's view was, and is, that they could see the city going out with both the Riverwalk and the City Walk and putting in the core infrastructure, having a master plan, but then the master plan has lots of nice little components to it that companies can donate to, that individuals can donate to. So you might have a plan that says in this part of the Riverwalk we need to have some type of an interactive water feature, a fountain type of thing, something like that. It would be great for civic clubs to raise money and participate in. The City Walk has the same kind of opportunities. You might have a garden area, you might have a seating area, you might have a water feature all along the way, keeping it interesting and dynamic that the community can embrace and be part of that process. Philanthropy is going to be key. The City Council went to other communities, they've heard that over and over and over again, that those donations were absolutely critical to how those communities redevelop. But ultimately, the biggest investment is going to be business. Just like with Picado Valley Boulevard. $3 million of city, your dollars, taxpayer dollars, $55 million of company money. I think all of these projects end up working out in a similar kind of fashion when you look at the overall community investment, not just the city or public sector's investment, the whole investment in the community. So we've got bonds up there on that chart. Let's talk a little bit about how bonds work. Ultimately, City Council will decide on those projects. You all have heard the conversation at the meeting last week, and thought was there might be more conversation tonight after I shut up and wrap this up. And I apologize. And I can go on this. I can talk about it all night long. It's exciting. But ultimately, looking toward a November 4th referendum, you all know that as well. And unfortunately, in North Carolina, every municipality is what's called a creature of the state. That means your city council can only do what the state of North Carolina will let them do in terms of raising money. And right now, the only option they have of raising money is property tax. Now, maybe at some point, General Assembly would give them a local option sales tax or a fair food tax or something else. But right now, the only option they have for making these kinds of capital investments in this community are property tax. So that's contemplated to be the revenue that would fund bonds. And let's drill down a little bit more about how this works. How do bonds get repaid? In my budget presentation, I talked about the fact that the average home in Hickory is $150,000. You know what? That won't be the case January 1st. The county is revaluing property. You've heard City Council talk about that next year and the impact that's going to have on the city's budget. That $150,000 house is very likely going to be worth $140,000 January 1st. It's supply and demand. It's the downward cycle. When you start losing jobs, they lose population, they lose value. You don't have people to sell your home to. You don't have competition for your property. And you're in this downward cycle so that everybody is losing value, whether you're a business, whether you're a city, whether you're a private individual. That's part of what this is all about, is changing that cycle. But just for analogy purposes, let's stick with $150,000 average home. $40 million bond referendum costs that resident $10 more a month. Okay? Let's drill down just a little further into it. The $10 a month doesn't happen day one. If the voters approve $40 million in a bond referendum, the city's not going to go out the very next day and borrow $40 million. Local government commission wouldn't let us. We can't do the engineering and the design, and you can't make those kind of investments that quickly. So the reality will be, and I've just done this for an example, is it might be that $10 million is borrowed in the first year and property tax goes up $2.50 to pay for that. That might be $10 million being built and investments being made for 2 years. Third year, you have another 10. Fifth year, you have another 10. That's kind of how that works. Over the course of 7 and ultimately 10 years, you can get a 3-year extension to the LDC, but they're required to borrow within 7 years. It takes 7 years before you even get to the $10 a month. And, by law, we need to disclose that as kind of worst case scenario. But of course, the hope is that as you're making these investments and things are improving, that values start improving, that sales tax start improving, that future city councils in year 5 and 6 may say, we don't need any more property tax to pay the debt. We've got enough. And the property tax rate stays at $7.50 a month. That's the hope, that's the plan, and other communities have seen it play out that way. The bonds are issued, it takes 20 years to pay them back. Just to remind you all, your city is in fantastic financial shape. We already have a AA bond rating. We have almost no debt. You have more money in reserves and fund balance that the council was talking about than you have in debt in the general fund. You can literally write a check tomorrow and pay it off. It's a great low interest rate, so it doesn't really make sense to do that. But the city will be completely debt-free in its general fund in 5 years. So you're in a great position to make an investment in your own community. It's a lot like building a home. Chuck Hansen always does a great job with the committee of using analogies to help us wrap our heads around this. I don't know of anybody who can go out and build themselves a home, a residence, without borrowing. Okay, so it's the exact same kind of concept. So we kind of conclude where we began. I mean, this is our reality. Nobody is making this up. These are data straight from the census. And I always love to conclude with a great, simple comment that Councilman Lell made at the Chamber's annual retreat or annual meeting several months ago that resonates. If nothing changes, nothing changes. I mean, that's where we are. I don't know that there's any reason to believe that we don't stay there if we don't do something. Appreciate your indulgence. Appreciate the opportunity to make that presentation to the residents who are here. I know staff's already heard it. You saw the list of all the groups we're going out to. One kind of technical point is, once City Council does officially take action, which it's planned to be done June 17th, once they say, yes, we are going forward with the bond resolution, state law at that point says staff and tax dollars cannot be spent promoting that. So at that point, Andrea and I are tagged out. We're not making these presentations anymore. It becomes official. The community as a whole is either going to have to grab a hold of this and run with it and promote it. It will not be driven by staff. It won't be tax dollars paying for signs or advertising or any of that. It's got to be the community moving forward with the bonds, and that's exactly what we see in other communities. So with that, council, I'll shut up, sit down, and y'all can talk or discuss or move through your agenda. Have a seat. Thank you.
That's the first time we've ever given Mr. Burry a
That might be a bad omen. I don't know.
You know, as I calculated this, that $150,000 house would pay, on average, $90 a year. Over 10 years, that's $900 on a $150,000 house. And I believe that investment, and of course I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is, because if we vote a tax increase, it affects everybody sitting up here. But I believe that investment would move the needle on saleability and value more than $900 in 10 years. And at the same time, think about all the additional amenities that homeowner would enjoy during that 10 years. So, Mr. Burr, you did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that.
I suspect Mrs. Surratt does a better job.
She does. But you were stuck with me, sorry.
I don't know what's happening. Are y'all hearing about, I mean, I'm hearing from people about Andrea making the rounds. Yeah. And I'm hearing people that are excited about it.
Yeah.
I look, I want to compliment that they are doing, do you see all the organizations they've been to?
Yeah.
How many did you do? 3 today?
3 or 4.
3 or 4. I know Andrea did at least 2.
She did 2, yeah.
Yeah.
We got the same tomorrow, same next day.
I mean, they are really making the rounds.
I got a bunch of emails I haven't responded to, but we're getting out and having a good time.
Well, it's appreciated.
In the morning. It is. Y'all are doing a great job.
It's igniting a spark of people realizing what we're really talking about is economic development and where this will take the city. And it's making people think very positively.
And now that you got John on board, we're good to go. I think this is your last night.
Maybe we ought to enlist him for the next few weeks he's here until he moves, you know. Put him on a committee.
People need to understand it, need to know it. It's their money we're talking about.
Okay, appointments. We've got a few appointments. If you don't, with indulgence, I'll start off with the ones that I think I'm supposed to be making. I nominate Sarah Willis to Citizen Advisory Committee at large. I reappoint Yvonne Setzer. All of these are nominations, by the way, until approved by the council. Yvonne Setzer for Citizen Advisory Committee. I'll go ahead and nominate Reverend Antonio Logan and Cleese Johnson Plant for Community Relations, and David Walker, Community Relations. Nominate Tony Rose as a reappointment to the Catawba County Economic Development Board. If I do something wrong here, y'all catch me, okay?
You took one of mine, that's all right.
Huh?
You took one of mine, that's
You got
all right.
one? Oh, I took one of yours?
Yeah, but go ahead.
Who did I take?
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You still get to vote for him.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I got that. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Well, any of us can nominate Dr. Eldridge and Randall Mays to the Planning Commission. Ward 3 also has one. Sally Anderson, Library Advisory Board. Edward Fuller, Public Housing Authority. And I am going, because I've gotten a few other conflicts since I accepted it, I'm going to resign from the Tourism Development Authority and would like to nominate Phil Yount to fill my term. Phil is absolutely the most qualified and committed citizen of Hickory to serve in that capacity. And he knows everything. He knows where the skeletons are. He knows everything. Okay.
I'd like to nominate Rich Brown for the Business Development Committee.
All right, since you took Antonio Logan, I want to nominate David Whitley to the Public Arts Commission for reappointment.
And Rhonda Hale for reappointment to the Public Arts Commission, Ward 5.
And I'd like to reappoint Junior Hedrick to the Planning Commission and also to the Parks and Rec Commission. He serves on both of those.
I think that's it, isn't it? Do we have a second to these nominations?
Second.
Second by Mr. Guess. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. Any petitions and requests? Matters not on the agenda? General comments?
Just one quick note, in a matter of time, Alderman Lael and I are members of, that you appointed to the MPO, and we just had our meeting last week, and 3 good projects vaulted to the top of the list. Lenoir Boulevard is going to be getting a new northwest quadrant turn, you know, where it's a problem where everybody has to turn left. West. Now they'll be looping around. And also the 321 bridge, $171 million. Did you see that?
That needs to be the priority.
And that's both lanes, right?
Yep.
Okay.
4 lanes.
Yeah, but both sides.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
I didn't want people thinking we're taking it back to 2 lanes.
Well, you know, at one time they did one side and didn't do the other side. They're going to do both sides.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Master. Tasting Tunes and Tomatoes. I don't know exactly what it is, but it sounds like a lot of fun.
Sounds like alliteration to me.
Huh?
I've ever tasted tomatoes than the tunes.
Is it every Thursday?
Yes.
Yeah, it's another T.
Thursdays from 5 to 8 p.m. Farmers Market. It'll include yoga on the square, painting on the square, wild skeins, yarn, and soaps. I was asked by one of our former council members to make this public announcement. Okay? Tell Sally I did something. Second, we had the honor of being named one of the top 10 cities in North Carolina to live. It was by an organization, don't laugh, nobody laugh, called Credit Donkey.
But ask if it's going to be reported in the
Nobody laughed. Credit Donkey, we were listed number 9th for all of the reasons that we know, well, many of the reasons we know this is a great place to live. Short commutes,
Low crime.
low, random crime, certainly. And I mean, for goodness sakes, if you read the paper this week, but we have low random crime in this city. And so, number 9, we're in company with places like Asheville and many others that are enviable. And I was in Raleigh Sunday, and I read the Raleigh paper. An interesting article on Rocky Mount. Google it and read the article, and it'll give you a flavor for another city that's going through many of the things that we have, only, believe it or not, I think they've been, the outcomes for them have been worse than we have had. Any other matters?
Just one more public comment that I'd like to say, in my observance of the Zara Baker Playground, nobody worked any harder than Mayor Wright on getting that to happen.
Well, I am so proud that when we think of Zara Baker and that tragedy, we now think of something very pleasant and not a roadside monument or something. Any motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We got, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no.
Nobody opposed to that.
Now I have to sit.